My mother leaned in so close I could smell the expensive perfume, hiding her desperation. "Take it off, Sarah," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. "Hide in the car. You're ruining your brother's wedding." I stood in the church lobby, smooth velvet ribbon in my hands, completely stunned. I had just returned from a 6-year deployment, surviving conditions my family couldn't even imagine, only to be told my existence was an embarrassment on Ethan's big day. My stepmother wanted a picture-perfect, high-society aesthetic, and my service dress uniform didn't fit her luxury theme. Everyone in the bridal party nodded in agreement, staring at me like I was a wedding crasher. My father wouldn't even meet my eyes. My heart pounded, and my hand trembled as I reached for my brass buttons. But just as I began to unbutton my coat, 12 men in the back row stood up. "My name is Sarah. I'm 27 years old, and for 6 years, my world was defined by combat boots, red dust, and orders. Before we step back into that tense church lobby, please drop the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far my voice has traveled today." Stepping off that plane after my final deployment, I expected warm embraces. Instead, I got a cold dose of reality. While I was overseas serving our country, my family's world had completely shifted. My father had remarried Evelyn, a woman whose entire existence revolved around country club memberships, social rankings, and maintaining a flawless public image. To her, military service wasn't a sacrifice. It was an unrefined, lower-class job that disrupted her carefully curated high-society aesthetic. My brother Ethan, whom I used to be inseparable from, had fully bought into her world. He was marrying Victoria, the daughter of a prominent local developer, and this wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a PR event. I had flown in straight from my discharge processing, exhausted to my bones, carrying a heart full of hope that I would finally be welcomed back into the fold. Instead, from the second I walked through the venue doors, I felt like an unwanted intruder in my own family's life. Evelyn didn't see a daughter coming home safe from war. She saw a tactical flaw in her perfect seating chart. I didn't just show up in my service dress uniform on a whim. It was a setup, carefully orchestrated by Evelyn months before I even stepped foot on American soil. When the wedding invitations were sent out, every female relative received a tailored bridesmaid dress and detailed dress code instructions. Every relative except me. Whenever I managed to get a satellite call through from the base, asking about my attire, Evelyn would brush it off with synthetic sweetness. "Oh, Sarah darling, don't worry about dresses over there in the dirt. We have everything under control for you." But 2 days before the wedding, when I finally arrived home, the trap was sprung. Evelyn handed me a plain, oversized dress that looked like it had been pulled from a thrift store bargain bin, 2 sizes too big and stained at the hem. When I asked where the matching bridesmaid dress was, she smirked and whispered that they simply ran out of fabric and didn't want me ruining the aesthetic of the wedding photos. She expected me to wear a rag or stay hidden in the back. But military protocol taught me self-respect. If I wasn't permitted to wear the family's chosen attire, I would wear the only formal clothing I owned that represented honor, sacrifice, and duty. My crisp, dark blue service dress, adorned with the ribbons and medals I had earned through blood and sweat. Evelyn thought she was putting me in my place, but she had no idea she was setting her own trap. The holding room behind the sanctuary smelled of fresh, white roses and cold ambition. With 10 minutes left before the ceremony, the heavy wooden door slammed shut, and Evelyn blocked the exit with her arms crossed over her pristine silk gown. Ethan stood right behind her, shifting his weight nervously in his custom tuxedo, avoiding my eyes. "You are not walking down that aisle looking like a recruiting poster," Evelyn hissed, her voice dropping to an angry whisper so the arriving guests wouldn't hear. She held up a faded, beige polyester dress, a relic clearly pulled from the church's donation closet. "Put this on right now, or you can sit in your rental car until the reception is over." I turned to my brother, searching his face for any trace of the boy who used to defend me on the playground. "Ethan, are you seriously letting her do this? I flew 30 hours straight to be here for you." Ethan adjusted his expensive cufflinks, taking a slow, deliberate step toward Evelyn. "Look, Sarah, today isn't about you or your military pride. Victoria's family invited major investors, politicians, and press. Your uniform makes it look like we're trying to make a political statement. Just wear the dress mom gave you, or wait outside. Stop ruining my big day. Every sacrifice I had made for 6 years collapsed into a single, painful truth. To my own brother, my service was nothing more than an inconvenient embarrassment. My heart felt like it was being crushed beneath the weight of their rejection. I stood there, surrounded by the family I had spent 6 years dreaming of coming home to, realizing that to them, my honor was just an eyesore. Evelyn smiled, a victorious, cruel gleam in her eyes, as she thrust the faded beige dress into my hands. "Make your choice, Sarah," she sneered softly. "Change or get out." My fingers trembled as I reached up toward my brass buttons. The silence in the room was suffocating. But just as my thumb touched the top button of my uniform coat, the heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary swung open with a deep, echoing thud. In unison, 12 tall figures stood up straight from the back pews. Every single one of them was dressed in crisp, immaculate military dress uniforms, their chests covered in ribbons and medals that gleamed under the stained glass light. It was my old unit, 12 veterans including my former commander and team members, men and women I had bled alongside in the dust. Unknown to my family, my former captain had tracked down the wedding details weeks ago to surprise me upon my return. They didn't utter a single word. They simply formed a silent wall of honor at the back of the room, standing at attention, their eyes fixed directly on me with absolute, unwavering respect. The silence in the sanctuary became absolute. The quiet authority of 12 decorated veterans standing at attention cut straight through the superficial glamour of Evelyn's meticulously planned event. Whispers rippled through the pews like wildfire. Victoria's father, a prominent developer and a veteran himself, immediately stood up from the front row, his eyes locked on my former commander's rank insignia. Following his lead, several high-profile investors and local politicians rose to their feet, clapping as a sudden wave of applause erupted through the congregation. The very high society guests Evelyn had spent months trying to impress were now completely mesmerized by the display of military honor, turning their backs on the altar to pay their respects. Evelyn's face turned an ugly, mottled shade of crimson. Her carefully curated hierarchy had shattered in a matter of seconds. Ethan stood frozen beside her, his jaw dropped in sheer disbelief as he watched his VIP guests ignore the bridal party entirely. My former commander, Captain Miller, took a measured step forward, his polished dress shoes echoing off the marble floor. He didn't spare Evelyn or Ethan a single glance. Instead, he rendered a crisp, flawless hand salute directly to me. "Sergeant," Captain Miller's voice boomed clearly across the church, echoing off the high ceilings. "It is an honor to stand in your presence today. We step wherever you step." In that single moment, the power completely shifted. I lowered my hand from my brass buttons, stood tall, and faced my family with my head held high. The reception hall was opulent, filled with crystal chandeliers and overflowing floral arrangements, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. Evelyn and Ethan tried desperately to regain control of the room, circulating among the tables, but the guests were only talking about one thing: the 12 decorated soldiers seated proudly around my table. During the speeches, Captain Miller tapped his glass and stepped up to the microphone. Evelyn immediately stiffened, signaling for the venue manager to cut the power, but Victoria's father held up a stern hand, silencing her. Captain Miller looked out over the crowd, his voice resonating with deep conviction. "Many of you know Sarah as a quiet young woman," he began, "but in the field, she was a leader whose bravery saved lives. What many of you don't know, however, is the true depth of her sacrifice." He held up a folder containing official financial documentation. Over the past 3 years, while Sarah was deployed in high-risk combat zones, she quietly remitted over 80% of her hazard pay and combat bonuses back home. She did this to secretly clear her father's mountain of business debts and fully finance the lavish celebration you are enjoying tonight. Gasps echoed across the room. Victoria's father stared at Ethan in utter shock, while the surrounding investors looked at Evelyn with disgusted disdain. The very luxury they had bragged about was paid for by the blood and sweat of the daughter they had tried to hide in a back room. Evelyn sat paralyzed in her seat, exposed, humiliated, and utterly undone by the truth. The silence that followed Captain Miller's revelation hung heavy over the room. Ethan looked down at his shoes, unable to face the disgusted looks from his new father-in-law and the investors he'd spent months trying to impress. Evelyn tried to stammer out a defense, but her voice faltered as guests began quietly turning away from her table. The polished facade they had built on my sacrifices had completely crumbled. I stood up from my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't need their belated apologies, and I certainly didn't need their validation. Walking over to Ethan, I quietly placed the key to my father's old house on the table in front of him. I gave everything I had to keep this family afloat, I said softly, ensuring my voice was steady and clear. But today, I'm taking my life back. I turned my back on the superficial glamour, the whispering crowds, and the family who only valued me when I was useful to them. Flanked by Captain Miller and my 11 brothers and sisters in arms, I walked out of the hall and into the warm evening air, leaving the past behind for good. If you were in my shoes, would you have walked away, or would you have stayed to demand your money back? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen to hear another unbelievable story.